This play is a problem play that addresses the issue of the post-incarceration of sexual predators who have served their sentences. In the playbill, Bruce Norris, the playwright, states, "A few years ago, I started doing a lot of reading about the things paroled sex offenders increasingly face: registries, residency restrictions, neighborhood watches, self-appointed vigilante groups, etc. Those are post-incarceration punishments that don't exist for any other category of criminal. And I started thinking about how having a common enemy, a universally despised class of criminal, namely the pedophile, helps the rest of us feel more virtuous about ourselves. And because social media inflames every group response, we can now all anonymously call for their violent death or endorse some gruesome form of retributive justice, often wildly incommensurate to the crime that's been committed." So that's quite a statement.
Yes.
And he had the audience wrestle with this play.
Yes.
As we observed 4 characters who are living in a group home that's actually sponsored by the Lutheran social services.
Yes.
So I'd love to hear your impression of the play.
Well, my impression of the play. There's a line there by the author about there being a special category, and of course, pedophile is a special category. Society doesn't know what to do with these offenders. We have the expression, a gift that keeps on giving. This is a crime that keeps on offending, if you will, because its long-term effects have been so devastating on its victims. And the play is very even-handed. It doesn't ask us to sympathize. It doesn't ask us to agree with any one position. The Steppenwolf production is very tight, very taut, brilliantly acted. It's a closet drama. And it really is a closet drama, and you're in a bell jar, really. And there's no way out for the audience to figure it, okay, I have a solution, or this guy's right, or that guy's wrong. We're dealing with what is imaginably the worst that humans can do to other humans, short of murder. Yeah. And so the question of, well, execution, that's a possible solution. In fact, is that society has withdrawn with that form of retributive justice, and it has no alternative solution. It's very interesting, very interesting. You see that this place where they live is not sponsored by the state, it's sponsored by a church. Yes. And that to me is really important. It's significant in the sense that this is evil. And society and the judiciary and the criminal justice system has no capacity to deal with evil. They deal with the law and its transgression, and that's as far as it gets. And by the way, of course, I don't believe it does a very good job with that, and I'm on the side of reform in terms of incarceration. But that the fate of these predators is somehow or other taken on by the church. I think that's very significant, because that's acknowledgement implicitly, you see, that there isn't a social solution to evil. We have law and we have a set of institutional barriers, etc., but they're human institutions, and they don't get to solve a problem like this, which is just absolutely terrible. The play doesn't give you any reconciliation, doesn't give you this catharsis or anything else like, and that's really to its credit. And you and I have talked earlier about another movie called Doubt, where the issue comes up again, but in a much more attenuated form. You're left in doubt, if you will, but you're not unsettled by your inability, and I confess that inability, to bring some sort of rounding off, reconciliation, explanation, etc. This is the worst. And what do we do with the worst?
Right. Well, it's interesting, as you talk about reconciliation, the play actually opens with the victim of one of the residents confronting him. So the
Yes.
victim, played by Tim Hopper, is in the role of Andy, has come after going participating in a group that a group of other people who've been victimized and has come to achieve a reconciliation, or I don't know if reconciliation is the right word, but to face his accuser as an adult, where he was actually wounded as a child.
Yes.
And he's there with his wife, and they come with a paper that they want signed. And the comedic part is it keeps getting interrupted as, you're in people are coming and going into the house. So Bruce Norris beautifully weaves in comedy as these people are trying to deal with this very emotional and kind of tense moment. There's people walking in and out and bringing in the groceries, and so he cuts it with comedy.
Knocking on the door of the bathroom. They have one bathroom between the four of them. Yes.
Yes. So all of that makes it very lifelike, but also gives this moment that could be very dramatic a comic spin. And of course, Andy and his wife leave unsatisfied at that point.
Yes. Well, I wouldn't use the word comic. I'd use the word grotesque, i.e. these are ordinary people who have to go to the bathroom, who have to shop. And of course, where they can shop is very, very narrowly defined and being constantly redefined. And so they are still, to a certain extent, or perhaps to a great extent, they are still incarcerated after they have served their time. But in my experience of the play, it's not comic, it's grotesque. And the grotesque is a category which defies all categories, because it's neither tragic, which is simply bad and nasty and you want some, catharsis or resolution, and it's not funny either. It's somehow or other, the grotesque is all about the incongruity. An incongruity which is not which can't be resolved. These are people. These are men. One is the father of a child, and the play sort of pulls you into a certain sympathy until you find out what he did, and you find out that he's still trying to connect with the child. I don't want to be a spoiler, so I'll say no more than that. But that the play is very important and very well constructed, precisely, I would say, in terms of the incongruity that the audience is faced with. Incongruity is the opposite of what we all want. It's clarity, closure. This belongs here, that belongs there. Mm-hmm. This is good, this is ungood, this is etc. And this play leaves the audience, as I found out during the talk back, with no consensus. No consensus at all. No one is, you don't come away from that play taking anyone's side, not even the victims. Not that I want to, prosecute him, but that he is coming, as you say, with this sort of charter of confessions. And it's clearly he's coming to this from his therapy group. And they do what they can, you see, to get these people reconciled back to ordinary living. And this young man, he's not young, but he's a father and he's a young father, can't get there. And the play leaves you with the idea that, well, sometimes you don't get to come to grips with this in any successful way. One of his predator there is a person who clearly doesn't have the moral fiber. The language, he loves the piano, he loves music. He was a music teacher. That's how they met. He's a teacher, and he preyed upon his students, more than one. Yes. But there's a kind of blithe, sort of something slippery about everything he says that makes you realize that this is an ordinary old man sitting in a wheelchair because, by the way, he was brutalized by someone who felt that they had to take justice in their own hands. Yes. But you don't ever get to, at least I don't, you don't get to where you want to feel sorry for this person, precisely because he's not at the level of his offense. I'll tell you, since I teach great literature,
Well, and you teach great literature in prison.
Yes. And I have almost nothing good to say about our prison industrial complex, our criminal justice system. But this offense, you see, is, let's say, off the rails. And I'm reminded, as I think about the play, about Dostoevsky's novel, Demons, The Possessed. in which you have the central character, Stavrogin, and I won't spoil this because you can have fun reading Dostoevsky anyway. He has abused a child. He has raped a girl. And he goes through life and we go through this story. And in the end, he hangs himself. We don't necessarily know whether he does it on account of that, but that he rapes the child out of a kind of suave indifference. I want this, God is dead and all that Dostoevskian, idea. And the jury's still out, so to speak, on what to do, how to deal with this, because it is the worst that humans can do short of murder.
Yes, well, and one of the things in the post-show discussion that I participated in, I said something about the rate of recidivism, and the person who was leading the discussion said, well, it's about 3%. He said, but I don't have the statistics. Well, I did look up the statistics prior to our conversation, and this was in a piece published by ABC News, where they said that was based on a study done by the government that said the recidivism rate around convicted sex offenders was 5.3%. And actually, the article from ABC News was that we're doing this post-incarceration action driven by inaccurate information. Now, 5%, 1 out of 20. I mean, still, are we willing to risk that? That's the question. But I think Bruce Norris poses it in a very, in a way that humanizes, that gives the perpetrators who live in the realm of monstrous, gives them humanity.
Yes.
Not, doesn't make them cuddly teddy bears by any means, but gives them a great level of humanity. And the acting was superb. And and the people who are in England who might see this, I hope you get a chance to see it when it moves across the pond to the National Theatre, where the same production is being mounted with all of the same actors, which is very interesting. And I was fortunate to attend prior to seeing the show, I was fortunate to attend an event for donors where they brought out most of the cast, not all the cast, and all of the women in the play are British, and all of the men in the play are Americans. So it's very interesting. I mean, you looked at them and you just were startled by the accent. So, but when they were on the stage, you would never know that they weren't Americans. They were great. But one of the interesting characters, one of the characters who kind of keeps unleashing new levels of management on the people is the parole officer.
Yes.
Who's played by an African-American woman. Well, no, a black woman from Britain. And you really, in her interactions with them, you really do see how the level of constraints against all of them.
Yes, but and you also see she's also an agent of disclosure. You see, you find out, and that's really a dimension of how intelligent the play is. Well, how do we find out about what these men have done? And it comes through her having to tell them, okay, we moved the goalposts, and there's this, that, and the other thing, and there's certain resistance to that. And of course, she reminds them what they've done. She also is there as an officer of the law to control the lives of these people. And she is not, she can be very sympathetic to the perpetrators. She's trying to make their life, bearable, it seems to be. She's not there just to finger point and to condemn. So that's part of the problem, you see, because if she came on too hard as a prosecutor, you might be tempted to side with against her and you don't get to do that. You don't get to side with anybody in this play. And my idea of this is that you don't get to decide there's no legal solution, no judicial solution in a situation of something that is so simply and obviously manifestly evil. You see, I mean, robbing a bank. Well, the banksters, Wall Street, Goldman, etc. Bankers rob. I almost mentioned a name, but here it's different. You see, it is the violation of innocence. than which there is no greater offense, or, to use the biblical word, scandal.
I instinctively dislike consensus. Consensus makes me uncomfortable because it feels like a civilized form of bullying, since it's never perfect and always manages to marginalize some dissenting voice. In the case of this play, the voices are those of ex-convicts who've done terrible things about which they have various levels of regret or defiance. And I want to extend compassion to them as well.
The idea of consensus is problematic, of course, in the sense that I'm reminded of Kierkegaard's remark, the crowd is always wrong, in the sense that the prosecutorial structure is that you want unanimity minus the victim, who is not the victim, excuse me, the transgressor. And sometimes unanimity is more important than the truth of the transgression. In this situation, we have an absolutely vile transgression and no effort to cover it up or to deny it, etc. There are other levels of denial, if you will, and that's something very human. Our desire to deny the worst about us, and the efforts that we make, like sitting and playing the piano and liking Chopin, that we make, sort of not to face that. It's a question of, can society come to grips with that? The question of compassion? I don't believe so, and neither does the playwright, because he has these people, as is often the case, I suppose, hosted by a church, you see, which obviously the church is not a body of legal, judicial, punitive, retributive consensus. It has a different role at a different level. And that's about as far as we get with this.
Well, then I think really that does lead us to the last statement that he made.
Yes.
Which is the audience should expect that the play is going to ask you who you're willing to extend yourself to, or, I don't want to sound too preachy, but give compassion to, which is the role of the church.
Yes.
And
yes.
And he goes on, or tolerate. Liberalism, I've always thought, is supposed to be about tolerance. Are we able to tolerate the existence of these people? Many among us would prefer that pedophiles be killed. That would be the simple answer, to say these people are sick, they're monsters, let's get rid of them. But we can't do that. So what if we said instead, these people are human beings and they're living in a bad situation of their own making? Now what do we do?
Now what do we do? I honestly feel that the author's remarks about his play are not the level of the play's understanding. We leave the play and we say, well, what are the words that we grope for to say what is our conclusion or our moral position, if you will? And so we have tolerance, and we have liberalism, and we have compassion. None of them are satisfactory. None of them is satisfactory. The play doesn't give you that catharsis that we expect, that reconciliation, a resolution that you expect, that we always have been trained and taught to expect in theater, etc. It is a closet bell jar style drama, and we are exposed to that in a way that doesn't allow us the kind of moral certitude that we profit from when there is dramatic closure, purgation, scapegoating, or whatever. The play is very, very disturbing, because what it deals with is ultimately, utterly, absolutely disturbing. And certainly, from my point of view, there's no judicial solution to that. The law is a human institution, and it has its own mechanisms and gears and flaws and faults and everything else like that. And it is not capable of dealing with the deeply moral issues taken on by the play. And I think that is really all a good playwright can do.
So that's where Bruce Norris and the play leave us, with the question.
Yes.
Not the answer.
No, not with me. I have no answer.